Today I'm going to be talking about Matthew Arnold. We're still deeply rooted in the Victorian period. Taking a look at this guy was basically more well known for his literary criticism and his essays, but he also did have some significant poetry during the time period. So I'll talk a little bit about him, and then we'll talk about Dover Beach. He was born in Laleham, England, on Christmas Eve. It's a Christmas Eve baby. 1822. He began his career as a poet early, when he was a student at the Rugby School. That was the name of the institution, where his father was the headmaster. And he was a really famous, for being an innovative headmaster, a strict headmaster. So he had a lot, very well known. He also studied at Balliol College. In 1844, after he completed his undergraduate degree at Oxford, he returned to Rugby, the school that he grew up in, as a teacher of the classics. He married in 1851. He began to work as a government school inspector, which gave him the opportunity to travel throughout England and throughout Europe. Throughout his 35 years in that position, he developed an interest in education and in the processes of education, which kind of fed into his critical works and his poetry as well. So he published two poems, Empedocles on Etna, and poems. They were text in 1852 and 1853, and that kind of established his reputation as a poet. And then in 1857 he was offered a professor of poetry position at Oxford, and so he became the first professor to lecture in English rather than in Latin. So during his time at Oxford as a professor, he wrote the bulk of his critical works, his criticism, literary criticism, essays and criticism, Culture and Anarchy, which were 1865 and 1869. And then he kind of put forth ideas that were kind of central to the predominant values of the Victorian era. He also wrestled a lot with problems of psychological isolation. We're going to see that in Dover Beach as we scroll on in just a couple of minutes to that poem. But he dealt with that a lot in his works. Isolation, a little bit of pessimism, and the lack of faith in general in the public. Religion actually was a source of great anxiety for him, and he really kind of sought to establish in a lot of his essays what was the essential truth of Christianity. What did it mean to be a Christian? His most influential essays, however, were those that he wrote on literary topics and the function of criticism in 1865 and the study of poetry in 1880. Arnold called for a new type of epic poetry. So epic poetry had been around, pretty much since the beginning of British literature, with big epics like Beowulf and those kinds of texts. The epic had been done and redone, and so he felt like there needed to be a new type of epic poetry that would address the moral needs of his readers, which is mainstream Victorian aesthetic, right? The whole moral code, the moral values. So he influenced almost every major English critic since, including Eliot, Trilling, Harold Bloom. And then his poetry had a lot of influence at the time too. The fact that he could address his most innermost feelings, and that his examples of his influence can be seen in poets like Yeats and Sylvia Plath, much later time. So he made two lecturing tours in the United States in 1883 and 1886, and he died in Liverpool in 1888. All right. Dover Beach was published in 1867 in New Poems. It's made up of 4 stanzas, variable number of lines. So there's 14 in some stanzas, there's 6 in some stanzas. There's no consistent rhyme scheme. However, we do have several random end rhymes that repeat the A sound, the and sound at the end. It's written in irregular iambic pentameter. So remember, iambic pentameter is 5 syllable sets per line. You have an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. It's a dramatic monologue that's kind of or lamenting, I guess maybe is a better word, the loss of Christian faith in England during the mid-1800s. And remember when we talked about the Victorian period and significant events, we talked about this kind of like uptick in science and things that were being discovered, and specifically the on the origin of the species and Charles Darwin's theories of evolution that were just kind of rocking the core of the Victorian people. So this is very much a kind of a goes hand in hand. He believes that people faith was kind of losing ground to these new sciences that were emerging. So let's read. The sea is calm tonight. The tide is full. The moon lies fair. Upon the straits on the French coast the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of England stand glimmering and vast out in the tranquil bay. Come to the window. Sweet is the night air. Only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land, listen. You hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling. At their return of the high strand begin and cease, and then again begin, with tremulous cadence slow, and bring the eternal notes of sadness in. So he begins Dover Beach by describing the setting in which it's taking place. It's clear from the title that the beach in question is Dover, obviously, which is on the coast of England. Dover is a kind of a seaside kind of popular vacation spot, a popular place to see some sights on the seaside of England. The sea is said to be calm. There's a beach. The water's at full tide. The moon lies fair. It's lovely upon the straits. Although the setting is not as important as kind of like what it represents, though. It's nice for us to get this picture, but what it represents is more important here. So he can see across the channel, the English channel, which is what he means by upon the straits. The English channel to the French side of the water, and he sees lights on the far coast that are kind of gleaming, and then they disappear, and then the cliffs of England are standing by themselves vast and glimmering. The light shines and then vanishes, which represents to him the vanishing faith of the English people. No one around him seems to see like what's happening except for him. And the night's quiet. It's calm, it's tranquil, but just because it seems that way doesn't necessarily mean that is the case. So someone is with him. He addresses someone. We see he says, come to the window, listen, you hear. So someone is with him as he asks them to come to the window and kind of breathe in the sweet night air. This person is more than likely a lover or a companion or a friend that he is spending time with in this scene. And so the second half of that stanza, he's describing the sounds that we are hearing. So we've got the water rushing on the pebbles, the waves rolling over on each other, and the pebbles rolling on each other as the water stirs them up, creating a grating roar. And obviously it's the tide, so it does this over and over and over and over again. And that whole the whole scene and the sounds seem sad to him. They, with tremulous cadence slow, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. So we have some allusions in the second stanza. Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant North Sea. So much shorter stanza this time, relating to the world in larger larger picture of history. So long ago, Sophocles he was one of the best known dramatic writers of ancient Greece. He penned Antigone, which is, his like best known work. Sophocles also heard this sound on the Aegean Sea, and it brought into his mind the feelings of human misery and how those emotions kind of ebb and flow. He kind of wants to bring to the reader's attention the universal experience of misery. Like, it's not something new. It's not something new he's uncovering. People throughout time have lived through this kind of misery. And then at the end, he returns back to the present time, as we are finding these same emotions. We find also in the sound of thought. So we're finding these same emotions in the sound. The Sea of Faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled, but now I only hear in its melancholy, long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Arnold is speaking about this diminishing faith that he is struggling with of his countrymen and his countrywomen. The Sea of Faith once covered everything, right? It was all over the earth, the round earth shore. It covered all the round earth's shore and held everybody together like a girdle being like a garment that kind of cinches you in and tightens everything that needs to be tightened up. But the point is it's very restraining, and it's encompassing. So the Sea of Faith once held everyone in its grasp. But time has passed, and so it now no longer is the populace united underneath that common faith. It's now kind of spread apart by these new sciences and these conflicting opinions and knowledge that's happening. And there's no return. There's no way that they can get back to that place again. The sea is receding now, melancholy and long. It's retreating in the rest of the lands of the earth and leaving people exposed. Stanza 4 is let us be true to one another, for the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy nor love nor light nor certitude nor peace nor help for pain, and we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. So he says, I love. So that leads us to believe that the speaker is most likely a lover or a romantic partner. And he's speaking directly to him, her, and calling, and to every true believer that's still out there that may be witnessing this same sight, and hoping for something better. He asks that they remain true to one another in this land of dreams, because the world is no longer what it used to be. And it's more like a dream state than the reality. It appears to be full of like various things, beautiful, new, and joyous things, but that's not the case. It looks pretty on the outside, but inside it has neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, and nor help for pain. It's not what it appears to be. So the poem concludes with a pessimistic outlook on the state of the planet. We talked about that being one of the characteristics of the Victorian period. It's a general pessimism, like life is this way and it's not going to get any better. That glass half empty kind of thought. As the people are suffering around the world on the darkling plain, they're confused and they're fighting away for things that they don't understand. Real suffering is happening, struggle and flight, and faith is slipping away. So that's Dover Beach by Matthew Arnold.